Hey, hey, podcast family. So today's guest is Alysia Raftery, an Australian naturopath and myotherapist with a passion for women's hormones and hormonal weight gain. She has a family history of thyroid issues, and after her third child, her thyroid symptoms went crazy. Things like brain fog, finding it hard to finish a sentence, and constant bloating. Testing revealed that she had SIBO, and then she discovered her SIBO was caused by cellular hypothyroidism. And this put Alysia on a mission to get the message out about cellular hypothyroidism and that the symptoms are not all in your head and there is actually help for this condition. If you have ever had thyroid test results that are normal, even though you don't feel normal, then this episode is definitely for you. Hi, Alysia. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I am really, really excited to have this conversation because when I think about thyroid hormones and thyroid testing and just thyroid health in general, I feel like we're just in such a quagmire with it because, first of all, thyroid hormone is barely tested properly as it is. So many women run into that issue. And then, when you do get your thyroid test results, the lab ranges are so wide from a traditional medicine standpoint. And I feel like, there's just multiple roadblocks that we run into when it comes to having optimal thyroid health and just even measuring what your thyroid is doing. Would you agree with that? Like, where do you stand on thyroid testing in general?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I see so many patients that just get their TSH, is their thyroid stimulating hormone, tested, and they're told that they're absolutely fine, even though they're not feeling fine. Occasionally, they might get the T3 if the TSH is a little bit out, but still, that can come up totally normal, and people still have those symptoms of hypothyroidism. So it's crazy. I mean, some of the symptoms that people can feel is weight gain all of a sudden. They may eat really, really healthy, do their exercise, and all of a sudden put on weight and have no reason whatsoever. It affects their digestion as well. So think of hypothyroidism. So hypo is slow thyroid function. So everything slows down. So with the gut, your digestion is going to slow down. So people can feel very, very bloated, suffer with constipation, hair loss, hair thinning. It's a wide variety of symptoms, particularly menstrual irregularities. So period issues, PMS, irregular cycles, heavy flow, painful periods. It just goes on and on. And to get that TSH told that you're okay, it's like there's got to be something else going on.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
I know. I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like it's such a slap in the face. And I think that, like you said, the TSH is measured. And sometimes I see T4 being measured as well. But as we know, right, that does not take into account multiple other thyroid hormones. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like typically, what would you like to see if someone is testing their thyroid?
Oh, well, I'd love to see a full thyroid panel. That way we can actually look at, yeah, of course, your TSH, but we can see your free thyroid hormone. So looking at your T3, which is more of the active thyroid hormone, that's the guy that does the switch. So that produces the energy and metabolism of the cell and function. T4, it's very, very necessary. It's more like your storage hormone. So looking at that level is very important. But the other one I like to see, which is really, really cool, is reverse T3. So, reverse T3 is the part of that T4 hormone that doesn't actually make it to the cell. So, that shows me or other people that are looking at the blood test that there's a lot of inflammation going on in the body. And that brings us down to going, okay, what's going on? Let's find this cause of why this person's feeling, overweight and sluggish and just crazy.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
full
yeah,
time.
I Oh, no, I was gonna go into this whole reverse T3. I feel like we're gonna cover that a lot more when we continue this conversation about cellular hypothyroidism. And so it's really interesting to me because when we were talking initially before we got, to on here today, you talked about cellular hypothyroidism, and I feel like most people again can't even get a proper thyroid panel run, much less have something like this looked at or even understood. So, can we talk about that? Because I know that cellular hypothyroidism can be a culprit when your thyroid tests come back quote unquote normal, but you still have all these symptoms. So maybe we can get into what cellular hypothyroidism is to start with, and then we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So, cellular hypothyroidism is basically when the thyroid hormones don't make it to the cell. So, the thyroid gland is functioning normal at the moment. The thyroid hormones are being produced as normal, but they're just not making it to the cell. You've got a little receptor in the cell, which is like your basic lock. You've got a key and a lock. So, the key is like the thyroid hormone, and then the receptor is the lock. And when they connect together, that's when the magic happens. But with cellular hypothyroidism, something's blocking it. So we need to get in and find out what's going on. So essentially, you'll get all those symptoms that I discussed. So the weight gain, the digestion issues, brain fog, finding it hard to come up with a sentence and complete it. And of course, the period issues as well. And yeah, so this is really, really crucial to finding out whether you have cellular hypothyroidism, because there's a little bit of a difference between primary hypothyroidism. So that's when the TSH will come up, a little bit high. And then if the gland is destructed, then people will go on to thyroid medication, which sometimes doesn't even work because that person could have cellular hypothyroidism. But yeah, so with that, that's yeah, sort of where I'm going.
So with cellular hypothyroidism, are people going to experience pretty much the same symptoms as if they had regular hypothyroidism, like you were saying?
Yes, absolutely. So they can experience, yeah, the weight gain, cold hands, cold feet, cold bottom as well. That's a really good sign. Also, things like the outer third of your eyebrow, if that thins and falls off, that's a really, really big sign that that thyroid's not happy and the cells aren't happy. So you've got your periphery thyroid symptoms, which is things that are in the liver, the skin, the digestion, pancreas, etc. But then you've also got your pituitary thyroid hormones, which isn't really sensitive to dieting or stresses. So that's when your TSH can come normal. It's like it just runs on its own machine. It's really tough and strong. But in the periphery areas, the transport is very energy dependent. So with energy dependent, that means that the cells need to be happy and functioning really well. So with cellular hypothyroidism, it sort of picks up when the cells are not happy. So there's a cell danger response. So in the cells, there's mitochondria. So the mitochondria have basically two functions. So one function is to produce energy. So the food that we eat, they produce energy and off we go. But the other function they have is to sense danger. So if they sense danger in a form of, say, there's pathogens or SIBO, if there's stress, trauma, inflammation going on, then they'll say, there's something going on here. We need to defend. So we're not taking in thyroid hormone today. You can just wait out there while we deal with other issues going on. So that's the main reason really for it, is the cell danger response.
So
Yeah.
is it basically like a situation where almost like insulin resistance, meaning that the insulin is not getting into the cell? Is it similar with cellular hypothyroidism?
Yes, very, very similar. And the two can intertwine as well. So usually one of the causes is insulin resistance for, yeah, if the cells aren't taking in insulin, they're not making enough sugar, you're not getting enough energy. And the same with thyroid, they're not taking in the thyroid hormone to producing energy as well. So absolutely linked. Yeah.
Linked and kind of a similar concept. I'm just
Mm.
thinking of it, of how people could grasp this, just so that they understand like what could be going on with it. But yeah, I feel like that makes sense. It's almost like thyroid resistance in a way, or thyroid
Yes,
hormone
absolutely.
resistance. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And for everyone
Absolutely.
who's listening, when you think about the fact that every cell in your body has a receptor for thyroid hormone, you can imagine how terrible you would start to feel if this goes on, or, continues on and just is left unabated.
Oh, absolutely. You can go on and on and on undiagnosed. So you can go for days, months, even years until the thyroid gland can actually have 90% of its function removed. And that's when it will be picked up. So that's a long time for feeling terrible. not fair. Very frustrating for people.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, can you describe maybe a situation with a client or someone you've worked with who has experienced this, maybe something unique, like they've gone for years and years and they finally got the answer to their problems?
Yeah. Look, I can share my story,
Oh,
if
yes,
that's
please do.
okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's funny, we just live our own story, and then it becomes super, super passionate as well once we understand what's going on. So after my third child, I began feeling super, super bloated. I put on weight for no reason. And I love gut health and microbiome food. So I was having so much fiber and just, doing everything I could. I was exercising, and I just couldn't finish my sentence. I had brain fog. I was feeling, not super energized. And the weight was insane. And I was super, super bloated. I felt like more pregnant than when I was actually pregnant. But
Wow.
anyway, yeah, so I saw the doctor, and my thyroid tests were absolutely normal. And the only thing that was a little bit out was my sex hormone binding globulin. And I just thought, oh, okay, that's just polycystic, let's just be aware of that, and just, yeah, whatever, put it in the back burner. But that's actually a bit of a sign to detect cellular hypothyroidism. But I didn't know back then. Anyway, so I did a SIBO test and came up positive for SIBO. And after cleaning up SIBO, I felt so much better. I lost weight, I could think again, I could speak again, and yeah, it was amazing. So that SIBO, well, the primary hypothyroidism, the cellular hypothyroidism had actually slowed down my digestion and had allowed SIBO to occur. And yeah, so that's the connection there.
And how did you figure this out then? What happened?
Yeah, so I figured it out. It was probably about 6 months later. Once I began feeling better, I did a little bit of reading, and yeah, just started finding out about cellular hypothyroidism. I thought, oh my gosh, this is what I had, and then this is like how I can treat my patients, because I can tell them, it's not really in your head. Your weight, this is how you can lose weight and feel better again. And yeah, it's amazing, just from, sometimes you don't even need to treat the thyroid. You can actually treat the cause and the inflammation, and the SIBO or whatever it may be, and the patient can feel better again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you mentioned that treating the cause and the inflammation, and you mentioned SIBO. Can we talk a little bit about that? Just about how those things are connected? Like, is there a particular type of person who is more likely to have this condition than, say, another person?
Yes, absolutely. So I guess let's have a look at SIBO. So SIBO is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it's basically when the bacteria, they head up from the large intestine and make their way into the small intestine. However, we shouldn't really have too much bacteria because in the small intestine, because we need that for absorption to produce energy and so on. So the cells, again, they sense that something's going on and create a bit of inflammation. They say, okay, this person's digestion's not going really well. Let's slow down and not work as well, because we can act as defense. So with the connection with the SIBO is, when things are slower down, then the digestion can slow down. You won't produce enough digestive enzymes or stomach acid to break down the foods. And when you don't have enough of the enzymes or the acids, then the food can ferment and cause bloating and encourage a nice overgrowth of bacteria there going on. So again, that leads to inflammation and just the person feeling pretty off.
Right.
Yeah, so that's one of the connections. And the other connection there is dieting and stress as well.
Every
The
time, every time.
Yeah, isn't it? Oh,
Yes.
there's a connection. And
Yep.
we think that, okay, if we restrict our calories, if we diet, then we'll lose weight. But sometimes it can actually go the opposite. I mean, if people that are restricting their foods or have been on, chronic dieting over the years, can actually end up putting on more weight than when they started and find it harder to lose weight as well. It's just not fair.
No, it is not. I completely agree. Um, I would love to talk a little bit about testing, because obviously we started off the conversation with talking about testing for well, just thyroid hormone testing in general and how challenging that can be. So what happens? Like, what's the difference between testing for, regular thyroid problems versus the cellular hypothyroidism issue?
Yeah, so we need to think outside the box for cellular hypothyroidism. One of the factors, as I mentioned, was the SHBG levels, so sex hormone binding level, globulin levels. So that's produced in the liver in response to thyroid hormone and estrogen levels. So if that's a little bit lower, then that's a bit of a sign that the cells aren't functioning well. Um, what else? Reverse T3. So you can get that in a full thyroid panel. You may need to pay a little bit more for that one, but it's super, super helpful because if we see that there's high levels of reverse T3, then we can understand that there's a lot of inflammation or the cells aren't very happy as well.
Can you
Another
talk
thing
about
that,
what reverse
yeah,
T3 is, by the way? Can you just discuss a little bit about it? Just because I
yeah,
feel like there's a
sure.
lot of people who aren't totally familiar with what that is. And like you said, you can pay a little extra for it. It's just, it's not always included in a full thyroid panel, but you can certainly request it. And I agree with you completely. We absolutely should be requesting it, considering what it can indicate.
Yes, absolutely. So reverse T3 is formed when the T4, which is your storage hormone, doesn't quite make it to the cell or not enough gets into the cell. So that forms in response to inflammation and basically it reverses outside of the cell. So it goes to the liver and gets broken down outside of the system. And the cells will produce it in response to trauma, if there's been a car accident or if the person's suffering with, say, COVID or a cough or a cold or an infection, because it's part of that cell to say, no, we need to clean up the cell, we need to act as defense. So you're not coming in, you can reverse your butt out of here and get out of the system, thanks. So yeah, that's how reverse T3 is basically works in a nutshell. And that's how it's really helpful to see that, yeah, that T4 is not getting activated into T3, which we need. That's our active hormone. And
Right.
yeah. Mm,
Okay. And so you mentioned SHBG, you've talked about reverse T3. Obviously, a person would do a thyroid panel, a full thyroid panel as well, which would have the TSH and free T4, free T3. Um, Thyroid antibodies, I imagine,
mm.
would be something as well, right? More to rule things out than anything, I imagine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The other thing that you could do is your basal body temperature as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really handy. So just taking off three to 5 days in a row, usually the first half of your cycle. So I'm sure half of or most of your listeners would be doing this anyway. So
I would like to believe that. I'm
yeah.
not so sure, everybody who's listening. I hope you are. But definitely go
Yeah.
into detail on that because I think that that's an important point to make about thyroid function and body temperature.
Yeah, cool. So first thing in the morning, just lying still, grabbing your thermometer and taking your temperature. But just bear in mind that if you've had stress going on or if you've been sick, your levels are going to be a little bit out. And if you have insomnia, you need to have a good space where you've slept really well for 3 hours for it to be consistent.
Yeah.
Same with checking your periods and for fertility as well. So we'd be looking at a temperature of this is, I'll give Celsius and Fahrenheit. So less than 36.5 or less than 97.7 Fahrenheit. In conjunction with all the symptoms, most of the symptoms mentioned and the other blood tests to give a good sign of cellular hypothyroidism. But that's a really, really easy and cheap way to test. And it gives you power as well because you've got control of doing it yourself as well.
Yeah.
The basal body temperature. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. And I talk about charting your basal temperature all the time. I'm a broken record over here. But what people don't realize, like you're describing, is that it can indicate a number of other things going on in your body. Hence the reason, we're talking about it here as it relates to thyroid conditions. And so when your temperature is too low, it may indicate that you're in a hypothyroid state. So I feel like something like this could be so useful for someone who maybe can't get the testing done right now, and or it's just not accessible for whatever reason. So I feel like that's a really good and helpful tip. And I'm curious though, actually, I feel like sometimes we need to test for longer or take our temperatures for longer, just so that we have more of a clear picture. I'm curious about the 3 to 5 days. Do you feel like generally someone can get a good enough idea of what's going on with their body, their basal body temperature, with just 3 to 5 days of taking their temp?
Oh, it's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because things can change. There's so many factors. I mean, ideally, it would be great if people could look back on, 6 months worth and have a look there and see what's going on. But I guess if we're waiting between patients, over a month or so, then it's a bit of a guideline. Yeah. And as I said, you've got to look at the other symptoms as well. But, it's still very helpful.
Yeah. And so 3 to 5 days you feel is good for pretty much anyone to be able to get an idea of what's going on if
Yeah,
they've
use it
gotten
as a
the
bit of,
sleep
yeah.
and all that. They've
Yeah,
gotten the good sleep.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
as a bit of a guide. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, I'm so curious about the 97.7 degrees Fahrenheit too, because I feel like my understanding, and again, I am no thyroid expert by any means, but my understanding of basal temperatures in the follicular phase before ovulation really can range between 97 and 97.7, actually. And that's considered okay, depending on the person, right? Because I feel like some of us tend to run a little hotter and some of us run a little cooler than others. And then like when you're falling into the 96s consistently, that's when I'm like, oh yeah, we should definitely look at that. So I'm curious about the 97.7 temperature, and if that's something that you learned or devised. I'm just curious like what your thoughts are on that, and like other people who may have lower temperatures.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a thin guideline, and it was made, I guess, a few, many years ago. But it's still a little guideline to use. So I guess if people are getting those temperatures, then yeah, check in with their symptoms. If they are feeling sluggish and having digestion issues and putting on weight, then yeah, they could use it as a factor.
Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
good. I feel like it's definitely a helpful tool. And I've said this so many times. I mean, your temperature patterns can definitely show you something's going on with your thyroid. It can show lower progesterone. It can potentially show you what's going on with your adrenals and your cortisol output. So I find that all fascinating. And I feel like it's a great little free, mostly free biohacking tool that people can use. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm curious about if we leave this undiagnosed, because obviously so many women are walking around with undiagnosed thyroid disorders or thyroid disease, full-blown disease. And it's criminal to me because it's not easy necessarily to diagnose, but I feel like it should be much easier than it is currently. And so if this is a misdiagnosis, or if there's a misdiagnosis that happens or they don't get diagnosed at all, what can people run into? Like what might happen to them?
Well, yeah, it can head its way to primary hypothyroidism. So the gland can get damaged. 90% of damage is terrible before they start medication. Then you can get autoimmune antibodies where, they essentially attack the thyroid gland. I think it's more detail to that, but as a general consensus, and that's like a bit of a cell danger response as well, where the immune system thinks that the gland's in trouble, because there's foreign objects, there's foreign things going on there, so we need to attack it or protect it. But um, yeah, maybe it's more of a protective response rather than people saying, "Oh, why is my body failing me? Why am I, having this autoimmune attack?"
Right.
So, yeah, things can go really pear-shaped and lead you to feel really sick and not enjoy life and affect your quality of life as well.
And so, are you basically saying that cellular hypothyroidism comes first, and then there is damage to the thyroid gland, and then possible autoimmune conditions that could arise afterwards? Is that kind of the general order it might go in?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So inflammation of the thyroid, yeah, thyroiditis, and then that can be caused from immune antibodies for the thyroid gland. And then the funny, well, it's not very funny, unfortunate thing is people go on thyroid medication for maybe the rest of their life and still not feel great. And because, maybe the thyroid gland may be getting a little bit of help, but the cells aren't, it's still not reaching to the cells. So, yeah, they can just feel forever yucky. So, again, we need to look at the cells and, make sure that they're activated and happy.
Okay. And so, with that said, is there a particular age group that you see? Because I'm sitting here thinking, like, damn, everyone's got cellular hypothyroidism in the modern world. It's just like all these symptoms you're
Yeah.
describing are obviously they're so prevalent. And I know you mentioned the stress component, and I feel like the psychological stress, the mental emotional stuff that we're just bombarded with on a daily basis is obviously a huge player in this. And it's creating this sort of like thyroid resistance, so to speak. And and I know obviously like we could all do with addressing that. But is there like an age group that you see who really struggles with this?
Yes, the age group I see usually mid-20s up to around, well, 40s, 50s, 60s. It gets worse sort of around perimenopause, menopause time. But
Oh,
you know what? It can actually happen in children as well. Thyroid conditions are really, really on the increase in children. Um, which
really?
is really sad. Yeah. So we need to be on the lookout for our kids as well, make sure they're functioning really well. So I guess the things for kids, they'll be feeling tired and maybe not doing a bowel movement every 3 days. Yeah, even longer. That's a bit of a sign too. Yeah.
Can we talk a
But the
little bit
main
about
group is,
that?
yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Oh.
we'll get into the ladies, older ladies in a second, but I'm very curious about the kids because obviously a lot of people who listen have children, and I hear this really often. I hear a lot of parents dealing with kids who have chronic constipation, and I don't know about the other symptoms. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about them in kids, but that one I find really interesting because it seems to have kind of been normalized, which I find also really interesting because obviously constipation is not a normal health issue to have as an adult, much less a child. And yet I hear that often. So is there anything you want to add about that? Because I think that that would be something that people might find helpful.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Look, when kids aren't moving their bowels, they get behavior issues. They get cranky pants. I mean, think of us if we haven't had a bowel movement, we'll be super stressed. They're
Yeah.
cranky, they'll snap. Brain fatigue, so they may be having trouble concentrating, paying attention at school. They may be staring out the window. So similar to behavioral issues because the food's not being moved. SIBO is not super, super common in kids, but certainly bacterial overgrowth and IBS is very common. And again, we need to look at that thyroid as well, making sure that the T3, the active thyroid hormones, are making it to their gut lining, helping them with their digestion as well. So, yeah, got to look after those kids.
Yeah,
They're the main
definitely.
symptoms. Yeah.
And so those symptoms are signs of potential hypothyroidism, in addition to the constipation issues, the
Yes,
lack of
absolutely. Yep.
concentration, all those kinds of things. Okay.
Yep.
All
Yep.
right.
Behavioral issues as well. Yeah.
Okay. And so then coming back to grown women, um, and so there's, do you feel like there's, like the biggest connection is the ongoing psychological stress, or do you feel like it's potentially like a traumatic event that maybe happened in childhood and then manifests as an adult? Like, what do you think is happening there? And why is it getting worse in perimenopause? Is it because it's perimenopause and everything just falls apart at that time and we all just have to suck it up, or is it that we're losing that estrogen and progesterone that we've had for our 20s and 30s, and they are obviously very protective and they work hand in hand with the thyroid?
Absolutely, all of the above.
Okay.
Um, Yeah, look, we have so much stress going on, and stress is in the form of physical. So we may have an injury going on. It could be a car accident, and of course, trauma, previous trauma from childhood, whether it's big T, so that huge trauma, or little T. If we, felt like our mum and dad was yelling at us, we didn't feel important, that can certainly switch that stress response as we turn into adults as well. Huge on trauma. And they're
Yeah.
cell censored as well. And then, of course, yeah, as we hit perimenopause, yeah, after 35, where's our progesterone going? And progesterone and thyroid hormone, they work hand in hand. And of course, if estrogen's on a little roller coaster ride, if that's going up, then the thyroid hormones are going to go down as well. And we have extra stress as we age. We've got, maybe looking after parents, looking after kids, maybe heightening in our career, pushing, pushing, pushing. It's so much doing in this life that we forget to just stop and be, and add in that self-care where we find that we just get back to the things that we love and just make us happy. So I think as we go through perimenopause, it's about just finding what you absolutely love and just igniting that joy again so that you can go through, I guess, the roller coaster times. You can more sail through those up and down times, and handle the stresses a little bit more, because it certainly does get harder as you age.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I think about our hormonal resilience just dropping as we move through our 40s, and then like you said, the life stressors just continue to sort of climb. And there's always more. I was actually just thinking about that today, like home loans and like
Mm.
all these bills and like all these things that are just sort of swirling around in your brain, and life feels way more full for me in my 40s than it did in my 30s. For whatever reason, in my 30s felt very carefree, and I didn't, didn't have a lot going on, even though it felt like I did at the time. So it is very interesting to, as you get older, to sort of lose your hormones, and then also, be potentially at a higher risk for developing these issues. I'm curious about reverse T3. I have one more question about that. So if reverse T3 is high, because I've obviously seen it high in situations where there's like a chronic illness, or like you said, there's a car accident or something really acute. So those kinds of like physical stressors. Um, and so a high reverse T3, does that always indicate cellular hypothyroidism, or is it a matter of, it would be high for a certain period of time in conjunction with other things like the SHBG that you mentioned?
Yes, I would use it as a conjunction. So, okay, looking at their symptoms as well, and then looking at reverse T3. I think if the reverse T3 is higher, then that's okay, absolutely. You've got the symptoms, your SHBG is low, and yep, there you go. We need to, or if they're suffering from insulin resistance, or if their stress levels are through the roof, or their cortisol is flatlining, then those type of things. And if you have a high reverse T3, then yep, that's definite cellular hypothyroidism going on. I guess with the reverse T3, you want to look at the ratio between the T3 versus the reverse T3. And if on the testing, if it comes up less than 1.2, then that's another signal that that reverse T3 is really high, and that's the active T3 is not going into the cells. So that's a little tool that you can also look at too. Yeah.
Okay, that's very helpful. And so, what can we do? Obviously, we're about to tell all of you that you need to get your stress under control. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on what someone does. So obviously, they're presenting with all these issues. Where do you begin with a client, say?
Yeah, so we want to make sure that the cells are happy, that they're actually going to take in that thyroid hormone. So vitamin A is a really, really good one, because that can help activate the cellular receptors. So they're the little locks to make them really open and happy to take in the thyroid hormone. And the other thing it does is to help support the cellular membrane, so keeping them nice and lush and open for the hormones to get in. So you don't need too much, so less than 200 IU. So you can take this vitamin A from food, say cod liver oil. You could have it liver. Some people love their livers. Probably most people will scrunch up their nose and say, no, thank you. But yeah, cod liver oil is a great one because it's also got your vitamin D, which is also helpful for reducing inflammation and helping the cellular receptors. So vitamin A is a great one to start off with. I also love making these mitochondria happy and helpful
Yes.
and producing energy. So we want to look at one of my favorites is acetyl L-carnitine. They transport fatty acids to the cells and out of the body. So if the person's struggling with weight gain, then acetyl L-carnitine is fantastic. It's also amazing for energy and brain function as well. So if they're, struggling with memory and finding it difficult to finish sentences, then that supplement is a wonderful one. Very helpful too.
I
And I
couldn't
guess
agree
as we,
more.
yeah,
I will
yeah,
say, yes,
yeah,
I second both of these things. I love them both so much.
oh,
Yes.
that's good. Yeah, it's been one of my favorites since I started. Um, I could go on, but that's okay. That's
No,
fine.
please do
Um,
keep going. We love all this information. It's great.
Cool. Oh, that's good. So yeah, as I said, really helpful for weight loss. And if you are going to the gym, then having the acetyl L-carnitine before your workout is very helpful. The other thing that you can do is making sure that your zinc levels are happy and high. Zinc is very helpful from foods like pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. If you're an oyster fan, great, have one of those. Otherwise, check in with the zinc levels. You usually in clinic will do a zinc taste test, and that's quite helpful to see where the person's zinc levels are at. And exercise, we want to make sure that the person's not doing too much exercise and making sure that they're moving their body as well. So, particularly for the perimenopausal people, sometimes they're just hitting that cardio a little bit too much. And we want to make sure that they're having their downtime and, checking in with, say, yin yoga and letting go of the day and unwinding. There were studies showing with long-term use of yoga can help insulin resistance and also help with thyroid function and helping keeping you nice and lean as well. And the other good one is Pilates. That's another great one to keep those muscles very strong. So the stronger the muscles are, the less fat you hold on to, and the stronger you feel, the stronger your bones are. Everything's just a win-win with all of that. So
Yeah.
keeping that exercise up. Yeah.
It's huge. I agree completely. Yes, I'm a big fan of building muscle. It's like I'm a total convert. I used to do lots of cardio, lots of dance classes, and
Mm.
I don't do a lot of those anymore. I do a lot of weightlifting now. And I feel like it's like you said, it's a win-win, right? Because that really helps address insulin issues and will improve insulin sensitivity, which of course will improve how your thyroid is functioning. So it all
Mhm.
makes sense and all balances out, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, weights are fun too. I used to hate cardio, but I do it. And now you just get in the zone. You feel so strong doing weights. It's amazing. Yeah, and notice the benefits. I feel like if you're eating well and you're getting that thyroid happy and you're maintaining your exercise program with weights or HIIT or Pilates, then everything flows better. Your brain works well, you're energized and you feel better as well in general.
Totally. And then you had also mentioned SIBO before. And so before we wrap up, I just want to mention that too, because I feel like internal stressors are obviously a huge problem. So whether that's SIBO or some other gut infection or, parasites or leaky gut or any of these things are hugely problematic for all of our internal organs, particularly the thyroid, because of course it's responding to these stressors. So would you agree then that someone, in addition to all this, should be looking at their gut health if they are experiencing gut symptoms, and even if they're not, because that doesn't mean doesn't necessarily mean you don't have a gut health issue if you're not experiencing gut related symptoms. So would you say that someone should be addressing the gut as well as part of this?
100%. Yes, absolutely. There's so many hormones in our gut, especially thyroid hormone. So, yes, always check in with the gut. There's lots of testing that you can do. You can see a practitioner, you can do SIBO test. Yeah, always start with the gut and the liver, and you'll find your way to home again after that. So, yeah, 100% SIBO, always. To test.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This is so great. Can you just share with everyone where they can find you and your potentially life-changing work?
Oh, thank you so much. So I love Instagram. It's my jam. I don't understand TikTok yet, but yeah, so my handle is at bodysync natural on Instagram, and my website is bodysyncnatural.com.au. You can check it out, that you can sign up and get some handouts. And yeah, and on Instagram I'll post, thyroid and hormone stuff and just some cheeky things on reels as well. Cool.
Amazing. Thank you again so much, Alysia. This was really enlightening. And for everyone who's listening, if you feel like you're struggling with thyroid related symptoms, like what she was describing, then definitely check, all the website out and as well as your Instagram, because I feel like there's just a lot more where this comes from. And I think that if we're struggling in this way, it's not normal. And I know that it has been normalized. And that's the thing that drives me so crazy is that this stuff has been so normalized and you're not supposed to feel exhausted. You're not supposed to have major period problems. So the fact that cellular hypothyroidism comes before the like full blown hypothyroidism, like you said, primary hypothyroidism is, this is a great time to catch this and address it. So hopefully everyone who's listening will check out your work and potentially work with you because I feel like we need to be well in order to live the best life that we are supposed to be living. So thank you again so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
That's a wrap. Be sure to click that subscribe button to join me for more Girl Talk Gone Menstrual in upcoming episodes. But in the meantime, check out my latest Period Party episode. And if you're looking for a deeper dive into your hormones, go ahead and take my period quiz at nicolejardim.com/quiz.